it's that time of year. It's time to look back at and rank every 2025 film that I saw. Or it's actually a little bit after that time. I'm a little late with this video. But it's a big one. Instead of doing a top 10 or bottom 10 or anything like that, I'm ranking absolutely everything. And this year I saw a whole bunch. I'll say up front that I don't bother with movies that I know aren't my kind of thing for the most part, which means you won't be finding many like superhero films or big blockbusters from the year because I just typically have no interest in those and I get little to nothing out of them. I also don't really keep up with television as it's coming out most of the time, simply because of just time. I prioritize films instead. However, I did see a couple of limited docu-series and TV-adjacent projects, so I'll chuck them into the ranking for the hell of it. I also just started Pluribus, and it's excellent, but I'm only halfway through. With the exception of Seurat and Die My Love, I've been able to see just about every single film from this year that I wanted to in time for this ranking. At least the ones that I think are likely to earn a spot high up on the list. And I was sent a screener for Seurat, and we'll be watching it soon, but I've delayed this video too much already as it is, and I had to just get it out there. Once I do eventually see Seurat and Die My Love, and any other ones that I think are particularly noteworthy, I will try to pin a comment down below that says where I would stick them into the ranking retroactively. But we've got more than enough films already to get through. This video is going to be long. There are 53 titles on this list, so let's get going. I bet there are at least a couple of films in here that you haven't seen and maybe haven't even heard of, so hopefully I can pique your interest with something new to add to your watch list. And by the way, if you want to keep up with my thoughts on movies as I watch them, you can head over to my website, samkench.com, or follow me on Letterboxd at brickwall_. And now we get started with number 53, the bottom of the barrel this year, The Lost Chapter, Yuki's Revenge. This isn't really a film at all, but I had to stick it in last place because Quentin Tarantino should be embarrassed and ashamed. This is an animated short that he made out of a supposedly lost sequence from Kill Bill that he did in Fortnite, and it's the epitome of selling out. This thing sucks. It should not exist. Number 52, The Carman Family Deaths. As far as actual productions go, because I'm not even counting Yuki's Revenge really, as far as actual productions go, this is the lowest of the low. If you haven't heard of The Carman Family Deaths, good. It does not deserve any attention. It is a disgusting, deplorable true crime documentary about this poor autistic man who was so clearly innocent of the murders that he was accused of, except this documentary, for some insane reason, is on the side of the cops and continues to vilify this poor guy even after his death. The people that made this should be ashamed, just like Quentin Tarantino. Genuinely, they should be ashamed. Nothing this year made me as angry as this trash. Number 51 is Waltzing with Brando. This is a smaller film that was sent my way as a 4-year consideration screener since I was on the nominating committee for the Astra Awards this year, and just like last year, part of the voting body. Unfortunately, this is a total amateurish swing and a miss. I did a full review for this one, which you can find linked in the description. Number 50, Sean Combs' The Reckoning. This is one of a couple of documentaries that have been made about P. Diddy at this point. This is the one produced by 50 Cent, which seems to be the only thing anybody talks about with it for some reason. And it's bad. It's a badly made docuseries filled with all the worst pitfalls that affect so many of these factory-farmed Netflix docuseries, which is all that this is. It's just another one of those. And it's the same bad editing right down to the opening of the series, forcing you to essentially watch a trailer for the show that you've already put on, and right down to the manufactured cliffhangers at the end of every episode, and the extreme stretching of shallow material and random tangents to make what could easily fit into 90 minutes instead into 4-hour-long episodes. It's just terrible, and it's disrespectful to the victims involved, and it's a bad way to learn about what happened. There are much better ways to just learn about what P. Diddy's crimes are instead of watching this bad documentary. Number 49, Cold Case, The Tylenol Murders. And what a surprise, we have another trashy Netflix true crime doc. My partner and I enjoy watching these true crime docs together, even when they're really bad. But there are some really great ones out there, like The Staircase or The Jinx. So many of them, though, are just complete junk, and this is the latter. It's total junk. It's a shame since this true story could be interesting, but it's a trashy Netflix doc with that trashy Netflix doc flavor that just leaves a bad taste in your mouth and cannot be ignored and ruins the whole experience. Number 48, A House of Dynamite. Kathryn Bigelow's latest film is by far the worst she's made in her entire career. It's overstuffed with non-characters delivering bland, repetitive dialogue. The entire story, which is already slim, unfolds in the first third before the film embarrassingly attempts a Rashomon-style reset that falls flat on its face by forgetting to actually introduce new information in these subsequent sections. The cinematography is wrong-headed and distracting the entire film, with the constant shaky cam and whip zooms for no reason. She'll film a shot through a door handle or in the reflection of a hubcap for no reason whatsoever. It's so annoying. And the politics are Bigelow's typical shallow US-centric slop. It's a total mess. It's awful. Number 47, Tornado. This is another smaller-ish movie and another that I don't think is worth your time, but of course you can still check it out if it piques your interest. And maybe you'll get more out of it than I did. I hope you do. Tornado belongs to this rather specific slice of bad movies that I can't stand, where they masquerade as something they aren't. Specifically, Tornado carries itself like an action movie, but it has no intention of ever delivering on this insinuation of action that keeps dancing around, and it instead cuts away anytime anything interesting begins to happen. What you're delivered instead is nothing but cliché archetypes, though it is admittedly presented with some pretty nice cinematography. Number 46, Companion. Sophie Thatcher seems like a charismatic enough actor, but I gave both of her buzzworthy horror films a shot, Companion and Heretic, the latter of which was a 2024 release that I didn't get around to until after making my 2024 recap video. And I found both of them to be overrated and completely unenjoyable, personally. It's not Thatcher's fault, she's just the shared tissue between the two scripts and two sets of filmmakers that didn't click with me. I found the sense of humor grating and none of the suspense or intrigue landed for me. Number 45, Unknown Number, The High School Catfish. This is another Netflix true crime doc that, while not quite as abhorrent or insulting as the others that I've mentioned thus far, is still terribly made and still morally questionable at best. This one got a lot of buzz when it came out because the true story does have a pretty insane twist to its credit, but the way that the doc saves this information to make it a twist is extremely manipulative and bad faith if you step back and look at this as an actual documentary rather than like reality TV drama, which seems to be how the Netflix factory farm frames so many of its docs. The way that it also doesn't challenge the culprit at the center of this whole case in any way whatsoever, despite that person being involved and on camera, is both morally questionable and just lazy filmmaking that passes over a huge opportunity that's right in front of it. Number 44, Ash. Musician Flying Lotus has been working on making a name for himself as a filmmaker over the last few years. I enjoyed the goofy segment that he directed for VHS 99, but Ash does not help his case. It's a sci-fi horror film that doesn't really have any of its own ideas and just borrows from better movies. There are some interesting visuals scattered sporadically throughout, but the direction is otherwise quite sloppy, and the material is stretched so thin that you're left just watching Isa Gonzalez kill time and wander around for a big chunk of the runtime. There are some strengths in the cast, namely Aaron Paul and Iko Uwais, but Gonzalez comes off horribly in this. She just holds the same expression the whole movie, like she's either refusing to act and instead just posing, or she's doing her best Gal Gadot impression. Number 43, Amy Bradley is Missing. Yet another Netflix doc that is stretched out way too long and makes some morally questionable choices. At the end of the day, even while trying to inflate its runtime, this doc doesn't consider some of the more plausible explanations for what happened here. And it doesn't hold the parents to task for their rampant homophobia, which seems highly likely to at least be part of the motivation for Bradley's disappearance, meaning it's an intentional disappearance on her part rather than some big mystery, but the doc doesn't pursue that possibility at all. That wouldn't be interesting enough, I guess, for the drama sphere that it's trying to play to, and it instead concocts these wild flights of fancy that have little to no basis in reality. Number 42, The Monkey. I really like Osgood Perkins' style, and I recently put out an Oz Perkins tier list over on my second channel, Brickwall Unplugged. You can check that video out to hear my thoughts on all of his prior films, and that list also includes The Monkey and Keeper, his other movie from this year. I won't spoil where Keeper lands on this list yet, but I will say at this point, that I think The Monkey is his worst film. And I hope it remains that way so that he can bounce back to making more solid horror flicks. The plot here is ridiculous and hard to believe. Theo James didn't work for me at all in either of his two central roles, and the humor misses way more often than it hits. I think Perkins is better when he plays his horror straight and atmospheric and doesn't attempt comedy. Number 41, Belen. I did a full review for Belen, so in the interest of saving time in this long-ass video, I will direct you to go watch that review to see why it lands where it does, despite telling an important true story. Number 40, Gone Girls, the Long Island Serial Killer. Another bad Netflix true crime doc. It's a by-the-numbers procedural true crime doc that just has nothing going for it and is pure, disposable fluff. You'll forget you ever even saw this thing the morning after you finish it. I wouldn't have remembered I watched it if I hadn't tracked it in my notebook. Number 39, 28 Years Later. This one might be a controversial placement on the list since we're still in the negative end of my ranking. I know a lot of people really liked 28 Years Later, but it made me a little mad. There was a stretch or two in the film where the vibe and the story and world building were working for me. But for the most part, this felt like hollow wheel spinning to me. I don't like the idea of stretching this material into a new extended franchise when so much of what's in this installment feels like completely unnecessary filler in retrospect. It's hard not to view the resulting reboot franchise as a cash grab by stretching it out this way. It's not terribly made or anything, but many of the narrative choices just rubbed me the wrong way. I'll still check out the next installment eventually, but I think I'll wait for this whole thing to be finished instead of checking out any more of them piecemeal. By the time the saga is finished, maybe I'll reevaluate this one and find more to enjoy, but to be honest, I doubt it. Number 38, The Fox Hollow Murders. Another true crime docuseries, but this one is a Hulu series instead of Netflix. It's still not one that I recommend, but to its credit, it is presented in a more interesting fashion and has some compelling visuals, but mostly just early on. The big issue here is that it again takes a true crime story that would make for a pretty solid 90-minute documentary and instead stretches it out into 4 hour-long episodes. And the entire middle of this doc is pure filler. To get all of the interesting elements of this story without missing any substance at all, you only have to watch the first 20 minutes of the first episode, then skip straight to the last episode. If you do that, you'll get a complete and compelling true crime experience without any of the gargantuan amount of filler that's holding it back. Number 37 is Sinners. Ooh, okay, oh boy, I know this is going to ruffle some feathers, this placement here. Sinners, I think, is easily the most overrated movie of the year. Just like Dune 2 from last year or Oppenheimer from the year before, Sinners to me is a big, hollow, spectacle-driven blockbuster masquerading as something with more nuance and depth than it actually has. I am glad that so many people got a lot out of this, but it's just not my thing whatsoever. I loved Coogler's debut with Fruitvale Station. I think he is a really talented filmmaker, but the MCU stink is all over Sinners from his time working in that space. The editing especially drove me crazy with its refusal to sit and linger in any individual moment and instead constantly cross-cutting multiple conversations and scenes together without letting any character or interaction breathe. It really is just an insult to the audience's attention span, and of course Sinners is cut by an MCU editor doing that same shtick. To give the film some credit, I think the performances are fine across the board, nothing that impressed me really. And that one musical sequence is genuinely excellent. If that was a short film or placed in the context of a stronger overall narrative, I would adore that sequence. Plus, it's always satisfying to see some Klansmen get blown away, that's something. There are things to like here, and I get why it's been so popular, but the story and character depth I was craving from all of the relatively serviceable build-up, it was all absent, and none of the horror or action elements in the latter half were executed in any way that came close to satisfactory. Number 36 is Frankenstein. You can tell this was a passion project for Guillermo del Toro rather than just being yet another IP reboot, but this sadly lands at probably the very bottom of all of the Frankenstein adaptations I've seen, though I admittedly haven't seen all of them. I never saw like Victor Frankenstein or whatever that one with Aaron Eckhart in a hoodie was. I didn't watch those. There are some kind of decent performances and some really cool design aspects to the locations and grotesque sciencey things, but that's really where the positives end for me here. The cinematography I found to be just beyond ugly. And just like Sinners, it has that blockbuster sheen where everything feels artificial, and not only when the CGI takes over for entire sequences that look absolutely horrendous. And even though it's such an old, timeless tale, the adapted screenplay falters, especially from the midpoint on. Number 35, Together. It's a really fun idea for a horror film with a really on-the-nose and obvious theme about codependency and toxic relationships that, while perhaps too blunt, could still be compelling and incisive. Unfortunately, it doesn't pursue its latent themes far enough or dig deep enough into the characters. The writer-director, Michael Shanks, has said that he set out to make a horror movie that would function as a strong drama if you stripped all of the horror out. And, well, he didn't succeed in that goal, I don't think. These characters are not deep or interesting, and their dynamic becomes tedious before the body horror even starts. Now, the body horror itself is pretty cool and is definitely the film's soul-saving grace, I would say. But just like the character drama, it's another area that I wish was pushed significantly further than it ends up going. Together is left as a good idea that doesn't deliver on its potential. Number 34, The Long Walk. This takes a somewhat goofy but really fun, high-concept premise and comes pretty close to being a decent time, but it falls just short of the finish line. The ending is awful, and it squanders the thematic buildup that the rest of the film worked toward. And the script is otherwise just pretty middling. The dialogue can be really overwrought, and some of the characters are far more annoying than intended, like that supposed comedic relief character, who I kept hoping they would kill off sooner. It's also a huge shame that the horror and violence that are inherent to the narrative are so poorly handled. Pretty much all of the blood and gore is purely just distracting CGI. Even something as simple as one of the characters just falling over is distractingly poorly executed and so over the top, with the character somehow sliding several feet and getting this over-the-top road rash, when all that would realistically happen is the character just falling over and being fine. Even if you didn't know who the director was, it probably wouldn't come as a surprise that he's the Hunger Games guy. What keeps the film watchable are the two leads. Cooper Hoffman and David Johnson are both great, and they really elevate the material. I would even say that their performances are too good for how schlocky the rest of the film around them is. Number 33, Keeper. This is the other Oz Perkins movie from 2025, and it's the better of the two, for my money, but still not good. It's close to working, but it comes up short. I also talked about this on my Oz Perkins tier list. Go check that video out on the Brickwall Unplugged channel to hear more. Number 32, Alpha. Julia Ducournau's follow-up to T10 is extremely disappointing. I loved both Raw and T10, and I went into Alpha optimistic despite the negative early buzz that it was getting. But yeah, I gotta agree with that early buzz. It's not very good. There are some good design elements and some memorable visuals, but the narrative is just too clunky to hold together. The script is far too repetitive, and it over-explains all of its ideals in a way that goes against this type of commentary-driven body horror. While T10 was wonderfully packed with themes and presented with room for interpretation, Alpha is on the nose and obvious, allowing no room for interpretation at all and severely lacking in subtlety. Number 31, The Mortician. Yet another true crime docuseries, this time from HBO Max. It's a bit better than the others I've talked about thus far, and it does have a pretty interesting central figure to follow throughout, but it still suffers from the same issue of protraction. The first episode is genuinely captivating, but it runs out of steam from that point on, despite a couple of somewhat interesting twists and turns along the way. Again, this should have been a documentary feature instead of a 3-episode series. Number 30, It Ends. This became something of a Letterboxd darling as one of the first exclusive titles in the new Letterboxd video store. And I think it ended up getting a little bit overhyped as a result of that. It's a fine, low-budget indie that's a promising debut for director Alexander Ulam. The characters have believable chemistry, but they don't have much in terms of depth, and we learn surprisingly little about them as people, considering how long we spend with them just hanging out and talking. It stays on the surface with all the character stuff. The film also doesn't really push any of its fun ideas as far as I would like it to, outside of the most direct continuation of its central road gimmick. And the ending goes on way too long. It hits a point that could be a good ending and then just keeps going for a while. It Ends is okay. It's fine, but it didn't do a ton for me personally. Number 29, Hedda. This is one that I did a full review for, so go check that video out to hear my thoughts. I won't waste time repeating myself here. Number 28, Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. Like a lot of people, I really liked the first Knives Out and considered the second one to be a pretty big step down, but not terrible. Unlike most people, it seems, I don't really consider Wake Up Dead Man to be much of a step back up. I think it's fine, but kind of just more of the same level of quality as Glass Onion, albeit with a pretty different tone and style, and I do appreciate the attempt to try something a little different. There's some fun to be had, but I found the plot far too obvious to be engaging on a mystery level, and the other elements not strong enough to be able to enjoy the film as purely a dramedy. The machinations of the plot are quite contrived, and the majority of the cast is woefully underdeveloped. After the first two Knives Out movies, it feels like the star-studded cast here is almost just compulsory at this point, as so many of the actors involved have little to nothing to work with and may as well not even be in the film. They don't really work as red herrings even, they're just there. Number 27, Bring Her Back. This was one of my most anticipated horror films of the year. Talk to Me was such a nice surprise, so I was eager for the Philippou brothers follow-up. Bring Her Back had me fully on board for the first two acts, but then the entire third act, and especially the big climax, left me pretty disappointed. I don't want to get into spoilers here, so I'll just speak vaguely and say that the resolution was entirely unearned by the protagonist and felt far too convenient and easy. And the resulting third act squandered all of the strong build-up. I think it's still a decent horror film with some pretty big flaws, but it's extra disappointing in that it comes so close to reaching greatness, but then drops the ball with that third act. Number 26, Black Bag. This is a decent spy thriller from Steven Soderbergh that is held back primarily by its low aspirations. It stays a bit too small for its own good and doesn't reach for much, ultimately not really culminating in a story that's particularly memorable or noteworthy, but the characters and dialogue are snappy enough to be engaging in the moment, and I probably do personally prefer a film that stays too small over one that goes too big and overreaches. Number 25, VHS Halloween. The VHS series is so hit or miss, even within individual volumes. That's the case here again, as some of these segments were grating beyond belief, while others were relative highlights for the series. Overall, I enjoyed this package, and I especially recommend the Kid Print and Home Haunt segments. Those two are really solid and memorable. Number 24, Devil in the Family, The Fall of Ruby Franke. Yet another true crime docuseries, but this one remained engaging enough throughout its entire 3-episode run. I was aware of the story of this abusive family vlogger, but I didn't know many of the details going in, and it made for an interesting watch. The one huge misstep is that it for some reason treats the husband/father with kid gloves and allows him to try to kind of spin the narrative in his favor and act like he was innocent when he so clearly was not. He's complicit in everything. They really needed to grill the guy a bit more, the documentarians, but instead they even gave him the final word. That's enough to hold it back significantly, and I'll also acknowledge that there have been a few other documentaries made about this subject already as well. I started watching another one of the Ruby Franke docs and quickly stopped since it was all just the exact same information repackaged. So no idea if this particular doc is the best out of all the Ruby Franke docs that have been made at this point, and I do not care enough to find out. Anyway, abolish family vlogging. That should be illegal across the board, genuinely. Number 23, Chainsaw Man, the movie, the Reze arc. Longtime viewers of this channel and my side channel might already know that anime was a huge gap for me for a long time, but over the last couple of years I've been working on closing that gap a little bit. My partner is a huge anime and manga fan, with Chainsaw Man being a particular favorite, so of course I got into that one. And I'm not quite as crazy about it, sorry Gray, but I think it's good and I think it's fun. There's a lot of great animation on display here, and I like the story direction that the movie shoots off in from the first season of the anime series. The shift in tone, the world building, and the deeper character work are all welcome. The action is fun at times, but there's so much of it, and a lot of it ends up feeling a bit too weightless when they're constantly flying through the air and whatnot. It got a bit exhausting before it was over. As an overall movie, pretty solid, and it has me looking forward to seeing the rest of this storyline play out. Number 22, Havoc. Havoc was another of my most anticipated films of the year as a huge fan of Gareth Evans. Now, while it didn't live up to those high expectations set by Evans' previous work, it's still a solid enough action film. The story and characters are way too basic in a way that didn't get me invested in or caring about the narrative at all, which is a huge downside. But the action is great and crunchy once it kicks off properly, even if the execution of that opening car chase was far more artificial than I obviously would have preferred. Number 21, Jay Kelly. I'm a big Noah Baumbach fan. White Noise was the first film of his that really didn't work for me, so I was glad to see Jay Kelly be a pretty effective bounce back. It's far from being his best, but it's a solid time. It's very funny, and the drama hit me surprisingly hard in that final stretch of the film in a way that I really was not expecting at all. Clooney is good and a perfect fit for the role, and Adam Sandler was in that rare mode of his where he decides to prove that he's actually a really great actor when he's actually trying. It's the little details that make his performance shine, and he nearly steals the show entirely. But the entire supporting cast is really great too. Billy Crudup really shines in his one big sequence, and Patrick Wilson, Greta Gerwig, and Josh Hamilton all get good moments of their own too. It's perhaps a minor Baumbach film, but it's a good time nonetheless. Number 20, Splitsville. I did a full review for Splitsville, so go check that out. I think this video is actually hitting the YouTube channel before my review for Splitsville, but there's a written version of the review already up on my website, samkench.com. That one's been live for a while at this point, so you can find that there. There's a link to it in the description, or you can just stay tuned for the video version hitting this channel eventually. Number 19, Mickey 17. Bong Joon-ho's long-awaited follow-up to Parasite doesn't reach the highs of his best work, but I was never expecting that from one of his English-language films. Mickey 17 is fun and has great highs, but I don't think it reaches its full potential. I think there was a lot more fun to be had with the cloning ideas at the heart of it, and I would have liked to have seen that thread pulled more rather than spending so much time with the creeper side of things, which was a more predictable and less interesting plot line that ends up coming to dominate the entire latter portion of the film. I think the right ingredients are in here, but the film's priorities were a bit skewed from what I would have preferred. There are so many TV shows that come out these days that I find myself thinking would have been better suited to a feature film format, but this is a rare time where I think Mickey 17 would have actually fared better as a TV show, where it could have taken its time and explored all of its more interesting ideas thoroughly. Number 18, The Phoenician Scheme. Wes Anderson's latest is another stunningly production-designed, gorgeously photographed, hilarious romp with an unbelievably stacked cast. If you don't like Wes Anderson's other films or have gotten sick of his style, then The Phoenician Scheme will certainly not change your mind. It's not one of his strongest narratives, and it doesn't pack the surprising emotional depth that his best films sneak up on you with. But I think you could say that it's one of his funniest, and it moves through its wide array of characters and locations with fast, slick pacing. It's a fun time. Number 17, Louis Theroux, The Settlers. We're finally getting into the really strong portion of the list. This is a great documentary that finds Louis Theroux heading to Israel to confront many prominent Zionists directly in person, as well as making the time to speak with Palestinians with great empathy and capture a lot of footage that other journalists have been unwilling or afraid to showcase. He's putting himself in real danger here. Theroux has always been so great at getting people to willingly expose their worst sides on camera, and he puts that skill to great effect with the Zionists here. It's a really essential doc. Also worth watching is the previous doc that Theroux made on the same subject back in 2011, which was called The Ultra-Zionists. Number 16, The Perfect Neighbor. This is another Netflix doc, but it's finally a good one. And actually not just a good one, a great one. This is why I think it's worth sifting through so many junk docs, because there are real gems that sneak through. Unlike those factory-farmed Netflix docs, The Perfect Neighbor has a distinct style and voice, and there is zero filler or manipulation here. It's told almost entirely with body cam footage and other cameras that were there rolling in the moment when this event happened, like security cameras and Ring cameras. There are hardly any interviews or B-roll because the material really speaks for itself. It captures a heartbreaking story that is far too common and has a highly specific point and message that it delivers extremely well. It's the best documentary I saw this year, though there are still a couple of big ones that I didn't get around to yet. Number 15, Warfare. A lot of people seemed to misunderstand the entire point of Warfare and wound up convincing themselves that it was saying the exact opposite of what it was actually saying. Gray and I did a review and analysis of Warfare over on the Brickwall Unplugged channel, so head on over and watch that video to hear more about this one. Number 14, All That's Left of You. This is a drama that tracks the history of multiple generations of one Palestinian family from 1948 all the way up to 2022. There were a few points where I wished the drama would dig just a little deeper, and a couple of characters that I wished were developed just a little bit more, but the film is tackling so much, and it was partly filmed in the midst of the ongoing devastation of the region, so any shortcomings are far more excusable in All That's Left of You than in a typical film. That being said, it's still a whole lot more polished and well assembled than I was expecting when going in with all that context in mind. And needless to say, it is a heavy and heartbreaking watch, and definitely one of the year's most important films. Number 13, Sentimental Value. Having loved The Worst Person in the World and other films from both Joachim Trier and Renat Reinsve independently, I was beyond excited for Sentimental Value. Ultimately, it didn't fully deliver on all that I was hoping for, especially in the third act, where I think it had an unfortunate tendency to kind of take the easier emotional out rather than digging deeper into the challenging drama that could have been mined. But I still think it's an excellently made drama that has a ton going for it. Reinsve is excellent as usual, and some of Trier's narrative and directorial choices really shine, especially early on, like with the characterization of the house. This is one that I plan to rewatch eventually, and I'm hopeful that some of the aspects that didn't fully work for me end up feeling smoothed over, though of course that remains to be seen. Number 12, Little Amelie, or The Character of the Rain. This is a Belgian and Japanese animated film, and it's another one that Gray and I reviewed, this time right here on the main channel. Check out that video to learn more. Number 11, Weapons. Zach Kreger's follow-up to Barbarian kicks ass and is so perfectly up my alley. A few people who have read my screenplays told me that Barbarian felt to them like something I would write, and then the same thing happened again with Weapons, so I guess Kreger and I are spiritually linked somehow, especially when it comes to the dark, surprising narrative turns that utilize big structural swings. I love that kind of thing, both as a writer and as a viewer. And I guess that makes this a good time to plug my horror novel, South of the Mason-Dixon, which you can grab a copy of today in paperback, ebook, or audiobook. I'll also tease here that my third novel is now finished, and I'll be sharing more details about that deeper into the new year. Anyway, Weapons is great, and it's the best out-and-out horror film of the year, though there is another with some horror elements that lands just a little bit higher up. Number 10, Train Dreams. This is a stunningly beautiful film, both in terms of its cinematography and its narrative. It's evocative of Terrence Malick's style, or the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, but with a voice of its own that is tender and touching and mines tremendous heart and visual splendor out of the natural world and the simplicities of life. Clint Bentley is definitely a director that I will be keeping my eye on. Number 9, Eddington. This is a divisive one, and it's easy to see why, but I think some of the discussion around the film has been a little misguided and shows a misunderstanding of what Eddington is really saying and doing. I'm planning on doing a video essay about Eddington at some point in the hopefully not too distant future, no promises. So I'll just keep it quick here for now and say that I think it has some issues, but the highs are so high that it's easy for me to look past those issues to appreciate everything it does right. I love the way the structure and tone are constantly evolving throughout the film. Eddington is one of the year's funniest films, and the progression the plot takes and how insane it gets with the violence and action in the back half left me with a big grin on my face throughout. Number 8, No Other Choice. I did a full review for this one too, and it was the last video to hit the channel prior to this one, so go check that out. Number 7, Hamnet. I really like what Chloe Zhao is doing with Nomadland, and even more so in her prior film, The Rider, so it was disappointing to see her take the route of so many promising new-ish directors and enter the MCU. But with Hamnet, I was relieved to see her emerge from the blockbuster sphere unscathed. Hamnet is drastically different from the narrative documentary hybrid of Nomadland and The Rider, but Zhao is in great form in the director's chair, and as one of the film's editors as well. Paul Mescal and Jessie Buckley are both excellent, and they have great chemistry together. And the young Jacoby Jupe in the titular role of Hamnet gives a child performance that is almost too good to believe. One of the best child performances you'll find anywhere. He does incredible work. Hamnet is a beautiful and deeply emotional film that got me tearing up at 3 or 4 different points throughout. Excellent soundtrack as well, with stunning music from Max Richter, who even reuses one of his own pieces of music, On the Nature of Daylight, which has previously been utilized effectively in many, many projects, including most notably for the climax of Arrival, and it's no less affecting here, maybe even more so. Number 6, Bugonia. The latest Yorgos Lanthimos joint is another banger. This is so much fun. There are some horror and thriller elements at play here that work really well, especially in these stunning black and white sequences, but this is also one of the funniest movies of the year. It is hilarious from beginning to end, and features perfectly dialed-in performances from Jesse Plemons and Emma Stone. Stavros Halkias and Aidan Delbis did good work in their roles to round out the small cast as well. This is a film that's both extremely tight in its scale and focus, and huge in its scope of implications at the same time. Like most of Yorgos' films, Bugonia is bound to be divisive, especially with the ending, but for me it has one of the year's very best endings. Excellent original score too, by the way. It gets huge and bombastic, and is used effectively as a punchline in more than one moment in a way that is extremely creative. Number 5, Late Shift. This is another one that I did a full review for, so go check that video out. Not many of you clicked on that one, but the director of the film ended up coming across it, so that's cool. And it's one you might not have heard of, so go check out that review to learn more. Number 4, The Secret Agent. Oh, what do you know, another one that I did a full review for. Go check out that video to see why I loved this one so much. Number 3, Marty Supreme. An electrifying drama thriller that starts fast and only continues to build momentum throughout its 2.5-hour runtime. It's a film that feels its length, but not in a bad way, in a way where the story feels huge and substantial and earns that runtime. Josh Safdie and Ronald Bronstein's screenplay is brilliant and easily one of the tightest scripts of the year. The way it includes so many fun set pieces that seem like isolated sequences at first until they ultimately loop back around and all connect in ways more relevant than you could have possibly predicted from the outset is just so impressive. Timothée Chalamet is the best he's ever been. It's a phenomenal performance, and the rest of the cast all get their moments to shine too. The Shark Tank guy is weirdly great in this. The Safdies obviously know how to work with non-actors really well. I loved Good Time and Heaven Knows What, and I warmed to Uncut Gems on a rewatch after initially finding it a little overrated on a first watch, but Marty Supreme is definitely the best Safdie joint. It's excellent on every level. Number 2, One Battle After Another. Easily one of the year's defining films. It's not the type of film that I expected from Paul Thomas Anderson, but am so glad that he made. It tackles such big ideas and themes, and handles them well without sacrificing either the thrills or the sense of fun. One Battle After Another is positively gripping for its entire long duration, and it's goddamn hilarious all throughout. Benicio del Toro is a highlight like he always is. DiCaprio essentially does an impression of the dude from The Big Lebowski for the whole movie, and it completely works and is hysterical. And while I've often been critical of Sean Penn, he works perfectly in an over-the-top villain role like this. Plus, Teyana Taylor and Chase Infinity are real breakthrough stars, and Regina Hall delivers a performance that I didn't know she was capable of as someone who only knew her from Scary Movie. It's excellent stuff, and I want to rewatch it already. And number 1, It Was Just an Accident. My top film of the year is It Was Just an Accident. I'm hoping to still find the time to do a full review for this one, so I won't spend too long on it here, beyond saying that it's incredibly well made and is one of the most important films of the year, in addition to being arguably the best. Just like last year's The Seed of the Sacred Fig, which is another one that Gray and I reviewed, and I called there the most important film of 2024, It Was Just an Accident was made in secret by a director relentlessly persecuted by the Iranian government. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. When a government sees fit to stifle and censor a work of art, that is often the surest sign that it's a vital piece of filmmaking. Seek it out and give it a watch. So that was 2025 in film. A lot of really great movies this year. It was pretty hard coming up with the specific ordering of the top part of the list here, but I'm satisfied with where things shook out. You can let me know your ranking in the comments, and you can subscribe for more stuff like this. I'll see you next time. So long.